Thanks, Scott, and welcome to everybody attending, um, even to John Fitzgerald. So, um, today we've actually got a very interesting topic, and it's one that for a long time, particularly here in the US, people might have turned a blind eye towards, but that's changing quickly. And this is all regarding the topic of sustainability. And while the US is still moving a little slower than a lot of other parts of the world, we're actually beginning to see a lot of movement here and a lot of interest, and not just interest, a lot of demand for sustainability capabilities and efficiencies and effectiveness. So, uh, before we get into things, let me just have Audrey and then Todd introduce themselves, give a little bit about them, and we can then jump into the topic.
Go ahead, Audrey. You first.
Uh,
Ladies first.
Great. I'm Audrey O'Donnell. It's nice to virtually meet all of you. I hope the chat is active and was able to be a good conversation. But I'm the Flash System 9000 product manager and the storage wide sustainability product manager. So I am excited to be here with you all to talk about the topic of sustainability.
Hi, folks. Todd Walls. I think I know most of you anyway, but I've been with storage for 23 years now, and first 13 at IBM. I'm sorry, at EMC. The last 10 at IBM. Basically came over here with the Flash System acquisition right after it was acquired. I joined. So yeah, I've got quite a bit of expertise in how this whole thing leads to sustainability. It's easy when the product is designed that way. So.
Excellent. Well, let's start off. Let me just throw this over to Audrey. Folks, I've been working with Audrey initially in her capacity as Flash System 9000 um, product management. And all of a sudden, Audrey came to me and started talking about sustainability and could we post this on Seismic and could we get a lot of this content up? And that was, I'd certainly heard of sustainability, but I hadn't had a lot of interaction with it. So that was my real intro. And that's been a little while in the past. But Audrey, let me toss this to you. Let's just start off with what is sustainability?
Sure, thanks, Roger. So I feel like a lot of people have heard of sustainability, which is, the goal of preserving and sustaining our resources that we have here on this earth, some limited, um, and ensuring that we're in a good spot for generations to come as far as our just green environmental state. But I let me give a broader picture. So I got introduced to the topic of sustainability because client after client, particularly in Europe, was raising last year just what are your sustainability statistics, what's your carbon emission, etc. Because there's becoming a lot of regulations around the topic of sustainability, particularly in that area, but folding worldwide. Um, and the topic of sustainability is extremely broad. It tends to be environmental, but companies tend to tie it up in their ESG efforts, which is environmental, social, and governance. So, where are they, sourcing their materials from? Is everything ethical? Are they abiding by regulations, etc.? So, it's a broad topic, and we'll get into the details of how storage applies, but in general, sustainability is trying to make our lives better and ensure we're being socially and ethically responsible with the resources that we do have.
Excellent. And, Todd, likewise, because of your role, I know that this, tends to hit you quite a bit. is there, is there anything you'd like to start off with and fill us in or let us know about sustainability uh, and its impact on current sales and certainly future sales?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question. Yeah, Audrey's correct, right? This kind of became prevalent in Europe first for obvious reasons, where energy is at a premium. Where in the U.S. we have energy at abundance. Why does this matter? And I've even presented some of features about the flash system that I believe are efficient and sustainable to some customers. I won't mention the DoD customers that it were, but they're like, we don't care about that. But I think over time, it will become a more of an issue. I think if you look macroeconomically, I think our energy prices are going to increase. I think because of policy, I think that we're going to be more limited on resources, and so we're going to have to be more efficient, smart about how we utilize what we have. And so that really just means, where do you find efficiencies in the product that you can augment and really help position and say, hey, look, we're doing this already. This is why you should pay attention to the flash system. And I think Audrey and I could probably list off at least a half a dozen technology things that we do that are extremely efficient, that should be of interest to our customers. So I'll leave it at that for now.
Okay. And I would like to let everybody know I put into chat the deep link that will take you straight to some of the sustainability information that is out in Seismic. This is all focused for the moment on flash system in this particular location. So, and it looks like Audrey may have posted the same thing also. So I would encourage you, certainly at your leisure, to check that out. Um, but Todd, one of the things that I was interested in was finding out that 38 of the 50 top world economies either have or are currently actively developing uh, environmental impact requirements. And this is what's really driving a lot of the interest in sustainability. It would be nice to think that we would just do it on our own. Um, but it really is impressive how quickly, and Audrey mentioned it, that Europe, there's no question they are out ahead of the US in a lot of their interest. Is there anything that you or Audrey that you can tell us, along these lines? You touched on it some, but what are the key factors that are really driving this and that IBM excels at?
Yeah. Okay. So just real quick, the first time I actually heard it asked that way. Key drivers, I would say, are three. One is basically the emotional movement, right? There's a group, there's a segment of American society that just wants to be more efficient. Look, I count myself among those numbers. I've got solar panels on the top of my house, right? I pay extra to have my recycling done every 2 weeks, and so I'm willing to invest in that for the future, for future generations. So there's a great number of people that think that way. It's basically an unselfish thing. Then another second driver, I think, is are there people who are thinking along the lines of the way I'm thinking? Are they going to impose their will on other folks? That's what regulations are, right? And so, right or wrong, I'm not judging anybody for any of their decisions, but I'm just saying that as more people with influence get into positions of power and they can create regulations around it, they're going to mandate certain things that you have to become more efficient. I think Duke Energy has a mandate to be 70% renewable. I think it was in the next 7 years by 2030. So, as Duke Energy, for instance, a energy provider in the Southeast, as they have to adopt to these regulations, they're going to have to impose. They're going to have to try to cost recover, right, somehow. And so they're either going to raise rates, or well, that's really the only way they're going to do it. Is they're going to have to raise rates on and pass this on to the consumers. So there's an economic piece that's a function of the regulation. So it's the passionate people, it's the regulations, and then it's the economics, the piece that is going to drive everything. I think is going to be the economics. So
I think to pile on to the regulation particular part of it, obviously it depends on where you're located and um,
yeah,
where you're at, how strict those regulations are on your data centers. But what I can say is that even if it's not formal governmental regulation, typically we're seeing that clients, corporations have a statement like the one that Todd just said for Duke Energy that's will be 70% renewable by 2030. IBM's is we're going to be net carbon neutral by 2030, and we have a really strong IBM sustainable background, by the way. Go read our impact statement if you're interested in IBM's corporate sustainability achievements. They're really strong. But I think these corporations are setting these big goals, and then their stakeholders, their investors, are going and measuring to see how they're stacking up to those goals. And so some of this has to do with regulation, and some of this has to do with corporate goals that investors, maybe not the government, but investors and other people are holding them to those goals. And they have to start focusing on having more efficient storage in order to reach those goals. Otherwise, they're going to be playing out out their ears for carbon credits or things like that to balance their statements, and that will not be sustainable, no pun intended. So
Okay. Well, this is interesting too, because I know, you know, every generation seems to focus on something. And I know that currently one of the things that's really interesting is that 60 odd percent of millennials who are looking at moving into the job market or changing jobs are actually taking into account the corporate sustainability of companies they're looking at. This tends to be one of the buttons that really um, motivates them, and it's a good thing because whatever your stance is, Todd, I believe you mentioned it a little earlier. There's a finite amount of everything
yeah,
here, and companies that are successfully minimizing their impact are definitely drawing attention. And, one of the things I know, and initially we never promoted this as a sustainability item, but I believe it very much is the incredible efficiency of IBM flash system arrays. I don't know if anybody's a bigger supporter of flash core modules than me. I was so excited. Well, yeah, Todd, I'm sure you're right there with me and Audrey. But I was so excited, you know, b- starting back in the flash system 900 with the micro latency modules. But then when IBM transitioned to the FCMs, and we had this more universal item that could be used in many places, but the incredible efficiency it brought, where we could bring 2-to-1 data compression and now up to 3-to-1 data compression, sometimes even better. But um, that makes a real difference when we can physically use less capacity while still delivering unheard of performance.
yeah,
Um, and so, just from a rack density standpoint, IBM, whether it was the initial intention or not, has had this amazing capability. And it seems as though that plays right into this whole idea of sustainability.
Yeah, and you might be thinking, oh, you kind of just went to capacity density. How does that connect to the topic of sustainability? Sure, we all want to be denser, we want to take up less space, but I think what's important is the more and more I've researched into this, obviously the goal is lower your energy overall, right? So there's a couple things you can look at. You could just look at really low energy options like tape. Okay, that's great if that meets your use case, but obviously there are high performance use cases that have to go to something more like flash devices. You could look at energy efficiency within that device, which we are able to blow our competition out of the water on, from what I've seen, because our flash core modules use less energy than industry standard drives in general. Or you could look at the broader picture. In reality, most energy around storage systems, aside from running the devices, is around cooling the devices. Um, the fans get cooking, and that's where your energy can really, really escalate and become much, much higher. And so the denser your devices are, the better the broader picture looks because there's less cooling infrastructure you have to have in your data center to support these huge IT infrastructure sprawl with so much cooling infrastructure. You can have a smaller space that you have to keep cool, which just in general is more efficient. So, those just to connect the dots on why even care about our raw terabytes per U, which we lead the market in significantly. Um, Compared to our competition, that really, when you look at the whole picture of data center energy, is a way to really take down your energy around your storage devices.
It's funny you mentioned that, Audrey. As you're saying that, I was remembering that I was standing in a data center in AOL, if anybody remembers what AOA is, and they kept it so damn cold in there that you would literally you'd have to wear a long sleeve. But then I would go and stand behind one of the Sun servers, and they put out enormous amounts of heat. So I would warm up behind the Sun server and then go stand in front of the box, which was right above a vent, to work. And then so it was just kind of funny to say that. But I'd like to say a couple things about the overall efficiency. I'm a Flash guy, so Flash is what I love. But I'm working with Ace, and I see Ace Lopez is on. If you truly want to be efficient, you don't sell everything Flash. Flash is not the best use case for all data. As we know, as data ages out, you don't need to access it. So why leave it on an expensive flash array that is energized, that takes power? I mean, even if it's just sitting there, that still has a charge, right? And it has to be continually monitored and flipped and moved around. The box is always working. It generates heat. Heat needs to be cooled. And then, so it just, the energy consumption escalates. But if it's sitting off on a no energy, a zero use media like tape, once it's offline, it's just offline. It doesn't consume. And so we have the ability to tier. Some of our competitors do not. So if you want a competitive advantage, sustainability is a message that you can talk about. You can say, look, not all data is created equal. Once it's devalued, it should be on tape. Do I sell less flash? Absolutely, I sell less flash. But do I help the tape, which is part of IBM, which is part of success, right? Do I help sell that product that's pure and other folks can't sell? Absolutely. So this is a wedge, right? So you always look for competitive advantages when you're going against the competition. And if you bring tape into the conversation as part of a sustainability message, they can't match it, right? And so why wouldn't you do that? Um, and so tiering and then tape, those things together. And I will just kind of tip lead a little bit. And Ace and I are working on putting this into a lab and getting it tested out so we can give you performance metrics on what it takes and how it looks. And hopefully, and my vision one day is let's have a bundle or maybe even a single PID where you buy a sustainability option. What does that mean? It gives me 100 terabytes of flash and 100 terabytes of tape all bundled together, all the software it needs to move the data around. These things shouldn't be that hard to do. Unfortunately, not IBM. We all know everybody's a line of business and it's difficult sometimes. But in a perfect world, I want a sustainability option. Click. I click a button and it gives me what I need. For you quick questions, how much capacity you're looking for. We do all the math behind the scenes. We know you're going to need about 30% of it on flash, 60, 70% on tape, done, right? And you get a configuration. That's what I would like to see. Will it happen? Probably not in my duration at IBM, but it would be cool. So anyway, I could go on and on, but to the point, I think use these distinctive technologies that we have at IBM and really drive your sustainability message with these unique technology attributes that we have.
That's actually great. And I'm glad you mentioned Ace Lopez, because Ace had also mentioned that Sean Brumet, who many of you know in the tape environment, has an excellent pitch on sustainability and tape. So, I'm really glad you mentioned Ace. And the other thing, and Audrey, correct me if I'm off base on this, but one of the things that I pitch when I'm talking to business partners around sustainability is also the idea of what IBM can do that our competitors can't. And that is to virtualize other storage systems. So now, instead of this prospective client needing to completely replace, say, all their EMC storage that they might have that's aging out, maybe it doesn't have the current features that they'd like, we could bring in a small, and I mean physically small, flash system array, like a 5200, and virtualize their box and breathe another year or two of life into it. So we make a sale, but we also help the client's sustainability picture. Is that a valid, approach?
Yeah, I like to think of sustainability in three big, like you should try to check these three boxes. Capacity density, which we already covered, energy efficiency or lower energy, which we already covered, and then product waste. And I think at the end of the day, just like I was talking about how these corporations are setting goals around net zero carbon by X date, they're also setting goals on X amount of recyclability for their corporation as a whole, which again, IBM excels at. In 2021, only 0.3% of IBM's total product waste by weight went to the landfill or got incinerated. The rest was reused, resold, or recycled. So IBM is a known market leader in this, and I'll link an IDC article about that. But aside from IBM's corporate, case on product waste, corporations want to have their devices last longer, because ultimately, if you have a device that lasts 4 years instead of 2, that's half the waste because you're only replacing it every 4 years instead of 2. And you get to use that device for longer, right? You get to depreciate that asset longer. And so when I think about sustainability and product waste, I do think about how you can upcycle some of your old devices and legacy devices, over 500 different legacy devices. We support external virtualization. Breathe new life into those devices. Get longer life out of them, but also get better life out of them, better utilization, etc., with storage virtualized. And then you can think about our FlashCore modules with regard to lifespan. That 5200 that they bought will be running FlashCore modules, and our FlashCore modules can last significantly longer than our competition because of our variable voltage technology down at the gates and etc. And then you think about, okay, what happens when they do reach the end of the useful life? They have to dispose of this IT asset, and they don't want it to hit their books. They want to recycle it. They don't want to just put it in the landfill. IBM, in a lot of areas of the US, will help them responsibly dispose of that device. And that's not the case for like any of our competitors, but we have GARS, which is our Global Asset Recovery Services, where we can go in and we can help take that device and reuse it, resell it, recycle it if it really is at the end of its useful life for our clients. So just thinking about that whole life cycle picture from a product waste perspective, we're significantly better. And then to bring tape into the picture, just for a few more stats, tape storage in general reduces e-waste by 80% compared to HDDs because it has a 10-year lifespan instead of the average HDD lifespan, which is 5.2 years. And at the end of its useful life, 98% of our physical tape solution is non-e-waste. So tape also has a fantastic product waste story as well.
Oh, that's great. But it's funny because I really didn't think I would be this, I guess excited really is the word. It's kind of nerdy, but I think it's cool that IBM is actually leading in this area. And it is an area that is becoming hot. I think it was just a week ago, somebody was asking me a few questions about sustainability, and they said, "Well, I know it's big in Europe, but what about the US?" And I simply pointed out that one of the things that's interesting in the US is what happens in Europe, we often see mirrored fairly quickly in California. And if it happens in California, by default, it's going to happen in the rest of the US because California is taking the lead on a lot of these kinds of initiatives. But let me switch gears because I've had people approach me, and I'm really curious to see what either of you say about this, who say, well, I think, because of sustainability or to improve our stance, we're just going to move things to the cloud. And that way we don't have, an issue. Is that legitimate? Is that a true sustainability move?
Well, that's a good question. I guess that would really boil down to, are these cloud providers providing the most efficient storage, or can you do it more efficiently yourself? Um, I don't know. By economies of scale logic, you would think that it would be more efficient if everything were done in a cloud, done in a modern data center where things are managed constantly. So I don't know. Maybe there's some stats on that Audrey could provide, but um, I don't know. That's a good question, Audrey. A cloud question to you.
Yeah, I've thought through this question some, for sure. And I think the reality is cloud has the potential to be more sustainable because it's a higher scale and they can get higher utilization on their storage devices that they are using, and therefore that kind of, resources bringing together can be more sustainable. But, and cloud providers often do show very sustainable metrics. But as I've done research at the very beginning of this, last fall, and then I keep up on this research, of course, of is cloud really more sustainable? When you dig into some of the biggest cloud providers and how they make their cloud more sustainable, um, it's typically because they're using renewable energy sources, not because they have the most sustainable storage behind their cloud infrastructure. They're also trying to sweat their assets. They're also trying to get the lowest cost possible. And that doesn't mean they're always going with the most sustainable options. What they tend to lean on is renewable energy sources, carbon credits. So I would challenge your corporation to say, if you do invest in cloud, know a few things. One, that it's going to be very hard to know truly the carbon footprint impact of your data. It's once it gets put into software, there aren't agreed upon methodologies for measuring carbon footprint impacts the way there are for hardware with the PAIA for methodology out of MIT. And so, if you are a corporation that really cares about having a solid impact statement with clear ESG metrics end to end on your corporation, if you invest in cloud, you're putting it a little bit into a black box. Might seem like you're getting better metrics, sometimes you're not, right? You don't know what storage they're choosing behind that. And two, I'd challenge you that you could also invest in renewable energy resources or carbon neutral credits or things like that because that's about what the cloud vendor is doing, likely for about the same price point if you're running your data center efficiently. So I think for me, don't shy away from the cloud in this area because they are doing a lot of good things. They are leading a lot of the renewable energy reliance in sustainable storage, but also don't think cloud is some golden hammer answer to this as well. It really becomes a black box. You don't know if they're running the most energy efficient storage. You don't know if they're just buying carbon credits. You don't know what's balancing those two. Versus if you have it in your own, you can say for sure with your corporate impact statement, here's where we stand with sustainability and here's how we can improve on that. So that's been my general take. Cloud is good. They're doing a lot of good things in this direction, but it's also somewhat muddier waters because they're not fully transparent on, are they buying a lot of really short-term life devices and creating a lot of product waste? Hard hard to tell whether they're really doing all the best things for the environment in that space. So, that's been my take. The control level seems like they are doing some good things. They definitely have a lot of blogs and great things they're doing, but when you look at how they're achieving their numbers, it's not always because they're actually investing in energy efficient devices. It's often because they're offsetting it with carbon credits, which is all right. Um, but at the end of the day, it's not just about balancing the scales, it's about using less energy overall. That's the finite resource. So,
Okay. That's actually really good, really interesting. And I guess one of the reasons I've wondered this is I don't know that they still do this, but in the earlier days, like Google would have tens of thousands of servers. And if anything went wrong with the server, they just turned it off. And on a monthly basis, they'd go through the racks, they just pull out all the servers that were off and throw them in the landfill. And so, you know,
Yep.
not a very sustainable message. It was a financially viable method, but those times are changing. And so, yeah, I was just curious. And I appreciate you explaining all that because you're right. I think it does get a lot murkier. Doesn't mean it's a bad move. It just means it's not as easy to figure things out. And that is one of the things I like about IBM's particularly flash system product that we're talking about is it has almost no waste associated. Like the packaging it's amazing how well IBM does in using renewable and recycled material to create their system. I mean, we have an incredibly strong message, and I hope everyone takes away the fact that while this may not be your client's number one issue today, I can pretty well guarantee it's in their top 10 list and it's going to just keep moving up. And Todd, I love the fact that you started off by saying, hey, I have solar cells on my roof and I recycle. We're actually having our solar installer come today
Cool.
in just a few minutes because we're going solar. And we've been recyclers for as long as I can remember, to the point where we now have more recycled content than we have
Yeah.
trash.
Yeah.
So,
That's always the
um,
case. That's always the case with me. I mourn the fact that they don't do glass here. They had, when I was in Fairfax, Virginia, they did glass too, recycled glass, and we turned it into asphalt, believe it or not. So, crush the glass up and it would make up asphalt, but they don't do it here. So I'm like, every time I have to throw a glass bottle away, it just kills me. But yeah, it is what it is. Again, I just want to, if you'll give me a minute, just to talk about
absolutely.
the flash system. So I don't think people realize just how far advanced this thing is. And everybody knows we use FPGAs down inside the modules to offload work that has to be iterated upon in every other box and every other competitor in an Intel processor. Intel processors consume energy, right? And so the question is how much more efficient are our FPGAs, which are basically a passive device and powered somewhat, of course, but they're not powered like an Intel processor are. And so um, if you think about that and then look at the competitors, what they do, it's the differences in core count between our box and Pure's box are dramatic. I mean, they've got 1U higher. Their boxes, their big boxes are their 5U. Our biggest one is 4U, right? In the flash system, 7300, which we would put up against their biggest, is 2U. And so they stop publishing core counts because it just starts to look really bad, right? When you're that inefficient. So the efficiencies you put into your engineering always lead to savings, whether it's a cost savings in financial dollars or an energy savings. In aggregate, that's called TCO, right? Total cost of ownership. That's how you want to present this customers. We're so much more efficient, so much more advanced that we do all of the work they do in a much smaller footprint. In fact, we're doing even more work. And I know that most of the people here on this phone are aware that we've got a safeguarded copy in our box, so we can get an additional capability of cyber resiliency. Some of our competitors have it as well. But I'm just going to lean a little bit and say that we're going to do a little bit more with data resiliency inside the flash system array. I don't know everybody on this phone, so I would just say that there's more innovation coming, and this is innovation that's native to the array. I'm looking at what Pure is doing. They are having to bolt things on. You notice they've got now they can drop in a compression card. Why? Why are they doing this? It's because they have to make space in their CPUs and stop and become more efficient there, or reduce the utilization there, so they can put in more stuff. And we don't have to do that because we're efficient out of the gate. This solid state engineering goes back to 1979 through the Texas Memory Systems acquisition, and so we're highly efficient, very and ultimately the end result is it's a cost savings in terms of dollars against infrastructure and dollars against energy. So that's my 2 minutes on that.
Well, thank you. And folks, just make sure you take a look at the chat before you leave today. Um, Audrey just put into chat a link to actually a wonderful YouTube presentation by our own Andy Walls on computational storage and just the almost incredible efficiency levels that we're achieving. I mean, this goes right to what Todd was saying. Um, and we are pretty much out of time, but I want to ask Audrey if you'd like to make some final comments to us, if there's anything that you'd really like to make sure people leave this presentation with.
I think the final comment I would say is that this is a new and leading topic in the market, especially in Americas. This is a newer topic, but with the strength that IBM as a corporate stance has on this and that our flash system devices have on this, you would be amiss to not highlight this for our company. We recently were looking at an analyst study with over 400 participants from corporations in America that are a part of, the IT decision making, that are aware of their ESG. And they said they ranked IBM as one of the top brands and definitely the top storage brand for sustainability. So that perception's already out there.
Cool.
And we just need to help them understand that it's really our flash system devices that require 29 to 46% energy than the top leading competitor that we compete against. So they can't touch us in this space. Let's make sure we go out with our claims really strong and make sure we can back them up, because it's true, this is a space we really lead in.
That is fantastic. Well, with that, folks, we'll bring this Mid-Market Tech Talk to a close. I want to thank all of you for attending, and I absolutely want to thank Audrey and Todd for coming and paneling with us. So thank you, everybody, and I'll turn it back over to Scott.
Thanks, Roger. Again, thanks for everybody for joining. We'll send a copy of this link to the recording for everyone to review and share as they need to. And we'll be sending out invites for the next month here next week. So look forward to that as well. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.
Bye, folks.